This episode of The Substance is brought to you by Chris Hotchkiss, American Family Insurance, and listeners like you.
What's this war in the heart of nature? Why does nature vie with itself? The land contend with the sea.
Are you righteous, kind? Does your confidence lie in this? Are you loved by all? Know that I was, too. Do you imagine your sufferings will be less because you loved goodness? Truth?
You landed on The Substance, a podcast aimed at being biblical, thoughtful, and human. Join us each week as we engage the culture without the culture war. I'm your host, Philip Marinello, joined by my friends and co-hosts here, Trevor Aiken.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
And Vincent Edwards.
What's going on?
It's a little bit of a somber day, but how are we doing here, fellas?
I'm actually really pumped to be here.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I'm here. I'm definitely enjoying it.
I am too. I don't want to get into too much stuff here before we introduce our guest. But if you're new to The Substance, Substance is a Christian variety show. Each week we talk for about an hour or so about something in regards to Christianity, culture, or the arts. And then at the end, we or our guests share some things that we've been finding enjoyable or edifying in the Shoutouts segment here. And today we have our... for his fourth time, I think you're the first Substance guest to hit 4. We've got Brett McCracken, senior editor at the Gospel Coalition, author. He's also serving as a pastor at his local church, soon to be father of 3. Welcome back, Brett.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you guys. It's great to be back, and I'm honored to be the first 4-timer.
For sure. They're about to do our Terrence Malick hat trick. We also had the Minari one in there, which was timely. And I think it was a nice time, too. I heard back from a number of listeners who it's nice to give a little bit of a boost to a new movie that maybe not be on a wide range of people's radars.
Totally.
Yeah. And I think this episode was actually commissioned by Brett, if I remember correctly, because the last time when we watched Minari, I'm pretty sure there was a quote in there from Brett that said, "You have to watch The Thin Red Line, Trev."
That was true. We are evangelizing Trevor. So this is our 3rd Malick Substance episode and Trevor's 3rd Malick movie. That's how
right.
it works.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gonna have to come up with more podcast episodes to get Trevor to watch.
No, I think
to
the New World. I watched the New World a couple months ago when I was putting something up, making an IKEA thing, and I was like, we should add this to the list at some point.
You were watching a Malick film while you were multitasking?
Actually, no, I was watching the making of documentary on the Blu-ray.
Okay.
I was watching the making of documentary, actually.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
And it took me about the whole hour and a half to make the thing.
As a side note, this is my first Malick movie.
Oh yeah, Tree of Life was 1.0, and you were not on for A Hidden Life.
Yeah.
Wow.
This will be my first.
Wow. Well, Brett, I'll just go ahead and make you this deal. You keep coming on to these ones that you suggest, and we'll keep doing the ones that you tell us to do. How about that?
Okay, sounds good.
I think we've done his longest movies now. I mean, his other ones are not short, but I think we've knocked out his longest ones at this point.
That's true. They're all easier than these to watch.
Oh, really?
Well, not necessarily, but shorter.
Yeah, not necessarily easier to digest, but shorter run times.
Yes, exactly.
I've really enjoyed my Malick experiences so far. Tree of Life and Hidden Life have become probably 2 of my favorite films. I think we were talking about it the other day. And obviously, everybody has their favorite silly film, which for me is probably Hot Rod.
Same.
But then when we were talking about favorite film, I'm like, I think it's probably A Hidden Life. It's probably A Hidden Life. I really, really enjoyed it.
That's great. It's up there for me, for sure.
But I'll be honest. For this one, I feel like I need some help I feel like I didn't take the prereqs to the class, man. Like I came in and I was like, oh, there's so much info and it's flying so fast. And I can tell that there's something really amazing going on here, but I just don't feel like I'm able to access it all.
Yeah.
I felt like the other Malick movies are contemplative enough in pace that it really allowed me to like take in each scene and kind of place it and synthesize it all together. Whereas in this war film, it was like thing, like question, like philosophical idea. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't keep up. I can't synthesize it all. What's happening? It's just questions. It's just
for sure. So just as a spoiler, this episode will definitely have spoiler. So if you haven't watched The Thin Red Line, it's a I believe 1988 film.
98.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, definitely stop this, go watch it, and then come right back to this point so you can take a listen.
I mean, it's a war film. You can make that choice
for sure. And I will say this one was interesting for me because I
want to hear your thoughts, Vince, because you're getting thrown into the deep end of Terrence Malick.
Yeah. So I'm gonna keep it $150 with you.
I loved it, guys.
I don't like war films as a point of genre.
Really? That's surprising to me.
It's sensitive to me, for real. Like I've never served in the army, obviously, or any point
Armed
of
forces.
military, but I think it's like, one, there's a point of just the gruesomeness of it that I just don't enjoy watching. Like even Saving Private Ryan, like I don't like that. Like I know it's an artistic piece and it's showing the gruesomeness of war, and it's really giving people like, hey, you won't go overseas to experience this, so this is the closest you can get to it. And I'm like, I don't see that as entertainment. I don't see that even in anything that I want to really imbibe as a like a media consumption. But then I also, and maybe this is not as parallel to war, but I grew up in the Undercity, and oftentimes there were areas that I lived in that felt like I was living in a war zone. And so it brings me no pleasure, in the same way that I don't watch movies like Boys to the Hood or
Boys in the Hood,
Boys in the Hood,
or Menace to Society,
stuff like that. I don't like that kind of stuff, because more than it is a depiction of what goes on in the area, it's almost like a deep memory of what I already experienced and either been a part of or had friends that were a part of it. So for that reason, the genre of that and war movies is just like, it's not my jam. However, I will still say this was a good movie.
Okay.
Even though I don't like the genre, Malick did a absolutely fantastic job of its depiction of the philosophical questions. And I mean, it's a deep dive into, almost in a sense, the problem of evil and how each individual handles it. So I think it was still a good artistic piece.
I almost feel like if you don't like war movies, The Thin Red Line is more of a movie for you, because he almost takes every single war movie trope and turns it on its head. It felt like watching it.
And genuinely examine it.
It's interesting because this came out the same year as Saving Private Ryan, which, also a World War II film by a prestige director. They're often compared with each other, Saving Private Ryan, Thin Red Line. They both got a lot of Academy Award nominations that year, but they couldn't be more different in terms of how they approach war.
Absolutely.
And so I often think it's unfortunate that they came out in such close proximity to one another, because they're apples and oranges in terms of film. Like, I would even say The Thin Red Line isn't a war film. Like, it's a war film in terms of the philosophical war. Like, the first line of the movie is, "What's this war in the heart of nature?" And the literal, interpretation of that is like, okay, yeah, there's a war happening in the jungle. So maybe that's what this film is about, like an actual war happening in nature. But really what Malick is exploring, and he tips us off with the first line of the film, what's this war in the heart of nature? It's the war in the heart of humans and in all of creation, right? Between depravity and innocence, and good and evil, and light and dark. And so he almost uses war as a genre to be the canvas, if you will, for his like larger exploration. But I think it's reducing it to say like this is a war movie, like you know. So.
Yeah,
sure.
A little while ago, I was looking through some of our top episodes, and I went back and I re-listened to Tree of Life. That was, I think, like episode 8. That was a long time ago. And you had mentioned, and you've mentioned it in your writing before, Brett. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but Thin Red Line was also your introduction to Malick as well, if I'm not mistaken. Why don't you tell us briefly about kind of your first experience with it, and kind of, I mean, in a way, kind of how that changed the trajectory of your cinematic life and your professional work.
Yeah, it was like the film for me that like not only introduced me to Malick, but I think got me excited for the first time about integrating my faith in like thinking through film. As a kid growing up, I always loved movies and I loved church and my faith, but they felt like two different worlds. They didn't have much, they weren't in conversation, and I had yet to see models of how they could be in conversation. So when I went to see The Thin Red Line as a high school sophomore, I think, in 1998, that shows you how old I am. But it was at West Glen Theater in Shawnee, Kansas. It's not called West Glen. I think it's called Dickinson something now. But that's where I saw it, and it was a mind-blowing, soul-stirring experience where for the first time, I like saw a movie that felt like church. Like it felt like a holy, transcendent experience, and I didn't know what to make of that. It wasn't about church. It wasn't about Jesus. It wasn't like using religious language. I mean, it does to some extent, but it was like, wow, like this is possible. Like it's possible for movies to move us into a contemplative space where we're asking the biggest questions of all, like, what is sin? What is this going on inside of me? You know, why do I do what I hate? Why do I not do what I want to do? You know, which is a literal line in the Tree of Life. So Malick is exploring this stuff in numerous films. But yeah, it was the film that set me on kind of the film critic path a little bit. And when I was in college and I started taking film classes from professors, like I would love just like talking about The Thin Red Line. Fun fact, by the way, the director Kogonada, who has a new film coming out this week called After Yang with Colin Farrell. So Kogonada is a pseudonym, and the actual guy was a professor of mine in college. E.J. Park is his name, and he's a Christian. He basically taught me how to think through film through a transcendent kind of spiritually like weighty lens, and now he's making films like that himself as Kogonada, which is cool. So
wow,
nice.
But I remember like specifically The Thin Red Line, like bonding with him over that and talking about that movie.
I mean, in film circles, like you said, it was in a way kind of surprising for Malick. It was his biggest, I think, public breakthrough. It got like 6 or 7 Oscar nominations and lost them all, some of them to Saving Private Ryan, which is to be expected. That's a lot more of a populist film. I think the only big thing it won, basically won the Berlin Film Festival's like best. Was that the something lion? Or no, the bear.
I think it's the Golden Bear. Yeah, the Golden Lion is Venice.
That's Venice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, in film circles, it was very highly praised. I know that Scorsese loved it, Siskel loved it, but the average person,
the average person watched Saving Private Ryan that year. But yeah, for film people, it was a big deal because Malick had taken 20 years off. He made Badlands and Days of Heaven in the 70s. And kind of made a splash in Hollywood as this like really talented American new wave director who had gone to AFI and was making these like really unique films. And then after Days of Heaven in 1978, Malick drops off the face of the universe. Like no one heard from him for 20 years. And people thought he was done with movie making. And still to this day, you know, no one really knows exactly what he did in those 20 years. He lived in France, I think, for a while.
Kind of lived out to the wonder a little bit.
He lived out to the wonder. So yes, he's sort of telling the story in autobiographical films right now. But yeah, he came back, you know, 20 years later with Thin Red Line, and it was a huge deal. Like that's why everyone in Hollywood at the time, like every like it actor of the late 90s like wanted to be
in the movie. Actually went to set. Some of them, a lot of them filmed. Some of them
are
the
on
final
the
product.
Yeah, there's a lot of A-list actors.
Star-studded cast for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting dynamics of the movie is, and throughout Malick's later films is like tons of A-list actors, and many of them only have 30 seconds of screen time.
He saved George Clooney for like 2 hours and 45-minute mark.
That's very true. Yeah.
Well, the funniest story, have you ever heard the Adrian Brody story? So Adrian Brody thought, he was under the impression that he was the star of the movie. So he literally showed up to the premiere thinking like, I'm going to be the star of this film, and he was like so angry that I don't think he has a single spoken line.
I think he says something to Nick Nolte when he chews him out,
yeah,
but not hardly anything.
Yeah, you can definitely spot him in the film at the end, but
kind of like Sean Penn at the Tree of Life premiere.
Yeah, same. Yeah, Sean Penn has been mad about the same thing in Tree of Life. Christopher Plummer in The New World was also angry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He went on record. I remember Christopher Plummer went on record like, I'm never working with him again.
Yeah.
Wow. Harsh.
But, I mean, I have theories about why Malick does that. Malick is all about humility and kind of the idea that like humans are just there's one part of creation, like, and we don't want to like glorify ourselves more than we need to. And he kind of practices what he preaches with celebrities. Like he wants to like humble them a little bit by like even someone like Sean Penn or Brad Pitt. They're not the star of the film. Like in any of his films, like nature, God's creation, is the bigger star than any single Hollywood celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And that it's just so counterintuitive to the typical Hollywood approach, which puts the celebrity on the marquee. They're the main attraction. For Malick, no. The ideas, the nature imagery is the star.
So, Brett, I know that this is a huge film for you. Have you gone back and read the James Jones story?
I never have. No, I don't know why, but I haven't.
I'm super curious about the relationship between the film and the book as well, because it definitely felt different for me than the other two Malick experiences. And I wondered, at the end of it, I wondered if it was because it was based off of a book.
Yeah,
I wouldn't want to say one way or the other. I haven't read it either, but I think that Tree of Life is wholly, it's a wholly unique experience that I think the only other thing that I've heard reasonably kind of put in the same conversation is 2001, but that's also a very different, very kind of sterile, and there is awe in a way, but not anything like the Tree of Life. So that's kind of in its own little bubble. And The Hidden Life is, I think, one of his most accessible movies, because it's got the contemplative, it's got the cinematography, even though it's a different guy, but it's telling a clear beginning, middle, end story about a man. Like there is I'm sure somewhat of the skeleton of some of the plot, and especially because the book was written about a world event, that there are tracks that Malick runs on, especially for scenes. And I think you were so it's not a war movie, but war is a significant part. Like I kind of put it in a war movie category in a way. And he's very much not interested in making, I mean, unsurprisingly, he's not interested in making a rah-rah, like nationalistic, a hero, like this is about heroism or anything. Like war is ugly. And I mean, you see it in both human and animals and nature are all reaping the destruction of war and evil.
Yeah.
So I was talking to my dad about this film a little bit, and I told him it's a war movie. He's like, "Oh, it's a World War II, yeah, So I told him, it's about Guadalcanal. But here's the thing.
You won't learn much about.
I'm like,
Battle of Guadalcanal.
literally, the fact that it's in Guadalcanal is just the setting.
Yeah.
This movie has nothing to do with the battle. Like, literally, it's the most generic. Like, Take the Hill is the only thing in the film, it seems, and it's like the most generic stuff. I don't even know. Like, you won't come away from that movie knowing more stuff about the Battle of Guadalcanal. You just won't. And if you go into it looking for that kind of experience, then you've gone to the wrong film, maybe.
Yeah. Anything about the war at all, really.
Yeah. If you wanted to go like learning about war as a philosophical concept, maybe, like, then you're in the right place. But everything about the whole like Take the Hill thing, it seemed to me more to really explore just the idiotic nature of bureaucracy in the military and the value of human life and personal ambition versus personal values and things like that, and how those things play off. And so it gets into other interesting territory, but like actual tactical details just is not the point of the film.
And one big takeaway that I got from the film in general was, because Malick does a great job of kind of commingling the idea that suffering happens to everybody, to nature, to the opposing side, and to, if you paint it that way, the heroic side or the victorious side or whatever. And he doesn't explicitly make it like American, non-American, more than it is just, we have somebody is pointed at enemies. But I think that's the part that really affected me. There's only two parts really that really like cut me deep. And that was one of just this picture of everybody suffering, and everybody thinks that their cause is noble and that they're doing what is best for their people. And so it's like, sometimes I feel like when we listen to news or news outlets and things like that, we often, think that we're trying to do something that is noble and honorable. And the other side, because we don't get their perspective, is only being evil and malicious and just trying to tear down. And we often get that perspective from media outlets. But then Malick does a great job of saying, nah, there are plenty of people on the other side that you don't get to see. You're not in those areas, but they are sacrificing. They are fearful. They are anxious. They are absolutely afraid, or some people are apathetic in a sense. And it's just like,
yes, they're not all signing up. Like, some of those people were just drafted. Like, they're not fighting against, like, it's the nations and the greed and the whatever it is that's behind war.
Yeah, the same emotions are there, and it's evident that these are humans on our side or their side or whoever side who are having a human experience in the midst of war. Yeah. And that was visceral. Like, that cut me deep. I was like, dang.
Right.
So, Trevor, for a hot rod tie-in here, I made a couple of lists of things here. Bill Hader, in his Criterion top 10 list, he mentioned the Thin Red Line, and his quote is that Thin Red Line is basically war from the point of view of God. And I thought that was really interesting.
Interesting.
Vince, what you were saying about like suffering as kind of a universal experience that the film captures. I really do think that's the overall impression that you get, is there's a deep humanity in terms of like recognizing that we're all bound together in this. Like, there's like the Thin Red Line is almost like this ribbon that like ties us all together, like on both sides of every conflict, like nature, humans, like we're all suffering under the curse, of sin. We all long for shalom. Like everyone wants paradise. Like no one alive doesn't want that. So we all want the same thing. We want to recover what was lost. and we're all suffering under the curse of what has been lost. And I think that's why the film feels so transcendent to me, is it kind of cuts through all the politics and just really has this elemental, deeply human kind of feeling of like we're all in this together, like trying to recover paradise in a fallen world. And you see it in there's different juxtapositions of like paradise and paradise lost, like when Jim Caviezel's character like opens the film kind of in this idyllic kind of village, and then later in the film he goes back to that village, but things have changed and people are afraid of him and there's no longer that peace. Earlier in the film there's a shot of an alligator just kind of swimming happily in the swamp, and then later in the film there's an image of an alligator bound up, with ropes, as if it's been caught and poached. And so there's those juxtapositions throughout the film of like paradise and visions of what we could have and what we might have had, and then reality of like being kind of cursed by sin. But it's a very empathetic portrait. It's like we all are struggling with the same tension, and I think it's beautifully done. There's one image that like always gets me, and it's after they take the hill. That's kind of Trevor, I think you mentioned that's like the most traditionally like war film moment, is taking the hill. But there's a scene at the end of that after they've just gone through the trauma of that, when like two of the soldiers just kind of like hug each other and they're like shaking, and there's this very tender moment of like just like wordless bonding over the trauma of what this experience was. And there's moments like that throughout the film of just like unity in the midst of the darkness of life. And so it's a beautiful film.
Two of the most moving moments for me was kind of moments where he was exploring, because the movie is told from the perspective of the American side. It follows the American soldiers. They're the protagonists. The Japanese army is the antagonist. But two of the moments that were most touching to me were parts where he humanizes the Japanese side. And there's a face of a dead Japanese soldier after they take the hill. It's kind of buried. And the voiceover for this soldier comes into the mind of Jim Caviezel's character Wit, and he says, "Are you righteous, kind, loved by all? Know that I was too." And
that was
that was heavy. And then at the end, after they take the Japanese camp, just one of the Japanese soldiers looking over at his buddy who's been killed, and just sobbing and hugging
he loses
his buddy's dead body, and just like it humanizes the whole thing. It puts it all into perspective. So those are some of the moments I found more accessible. But there's also this big tension going on between Wit and Sean Penn's character Top.
It's Sergeant Welsh, I think.
Sergeant Welsh.
Yeah, Welsh.
It gets confusing.
Well, that's also something to discuss with this movie, because it's often brought up as a criticism. Like, I couldn't tell who was who, and the voiceovers like blended together, and I didn't know if it was Jim Caviezel talking or Ben Chaplin.
I did have that struggle.
It all blends together, but I mean, I think that is by design from Malick's point of view. He wants the voice to be the singular voice of humanity talking, and it just so happens that there's different bodies on the screen.
It's chaotic like war. It doesn't have a unified perspective.
For sure.
Huh?
Well, seeing the soldier in the ground was I had forgotten about that. It's been a while. I've seen this movie a number of times. My first viewing was very impactful, but it was also very unideal. In college, I was a security guard, and I watched it overnight in the security guard shack on a computer. And it was moving, but it was not the most ideal. And I'd seen it once or twice since then, but I'd forgotten about the scene with the soldier in the dirt with just like a little part of his face showing. And then not too long after that, I believe, is the whole siege on the village. And I mean, that is technically, every time I watch it, I'm just astounded, going like, how did they like stage and block this and shoot this? And how is this safe with all the chaos and the explosions and the rifles going off, all these things? But then, like, you talked about how it's about humanity. It's not about old Hollywood or even some current stuff where it's like good guys versus bad guys. It's about, these are men, we would say, like, made in the image of God, slaughtering each other for national aspiration. I mean, I'm sure some people are defending themselves, but I mean, like, World War II had a lot of, it was unnecessary. I mean, wars, I mean, we can kind of get into that, I guess, too. Like, Malick was probably commenting on the nature of human war, how it's not necessary, but it's also a natural byproduct of the evil that's in the world. But just that whole scene from everybody's point of view, like, people are terrified. There's no, it's not exciting. Like, it's terrifying and heartbreaking. You're seeing men unnecessarily kill each other. Some people are running away. You see the people throwing down their weapons and putting their hands up and hoping not to get killed. Like, a lot of these people probably have, like, families and things to get back to and stuff like that. And it's, you just see all the carnage, and Malick is provoking us to go, like, oh, like, because we can read it in a history book, you're like, all right, there's bad guys out there, like, and that's what recruiters are, like, sign you up, like, let's serve our country and, like, protect us from all these bad guys out there. And not that that is entirely irrelevant either. But I mean, it's not something you engage in thoughtlessly. And we talked about this before we recorded. Watching this movie this week, like, we're recording early March, like, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
You know, to me, that's where this film felt a little bit, this is going to be the wrong word, and I'm about to chuck a grenade into this whole conversation. I apologize, but, like, out of touch. It seemed very much I was watching a film from 30 years ago, and, like, it was speaking to the moment, like a moment when Saving Private Ryan literally just came out, and it was kind of like, war is fun, and, you know, America's about to go on to make all of these Call of Duty video games, and, you know, it's gonna this cool thing. And, like, right now, you know, especially in a post 9/11 world, in a post however many decades we were in Afghanistan world, and not even to get into the politics of all that, but I think the national moment is so different now versus 1998 with its attitudes towards war, that it felt like, you know, and especially now with this, you know, thing where Russia invades Ukraine for basically no reason. I mean, basically just Putin trying to assert his authority over against European unity. And it's like, it feels like we don't want war, but, like, when it comes to us, like, in the example of Ukraine, like, then you better fight it well, you know. And again, I've been rooting for some Ukrainian soldiers recently in ways that I wouldn't expect to, but, you know, it's like people are fighting for their homes, you know.
I don't want to throw a wrench in the thought process there, but I'm gonna tell you the second part that really affected me. And it might not affect you guys, but when the guy, I forget the guy's name, but when the guy's wife wrote him a letter and said she wanted a divorce, that broke my heart, because they did a very detailed and what I would say a well executed understanding of this man, and I would say even her love for each other. And they really understood each other and spent so much time together. But it also shows the effect of what war does to those who aren't involved. And so it's like, she's asking, yo, I fell for somebody else, we need to separate, you know. And it's like, I was hurt for this guy. I was actually feeling like, wow, what, that is so shady. I felt offended, honestly, because it was just like, yo, this man is serving his country, and, you know, as long as the Lord preserves his life, he is going to survive. He's coming back to you, and he loves you. He's not even looking at anybody else, because he made that statement. He's not looking at any other girl. He's waiting to get back to his woman. And then she writes him a letter that says, I found someone else, and I want a divorce. And it's like, that crushed me for him.
Dude,
And
I kind of felt like that was a metaphor in miniature of the film's perspective on war.
Yeah.
There's these good and right passions that some people have, and then there's just conflict and things that, you know, arise where they're not in alignment, and then you have divorce. And it was like there's the divorce among these people that belong together, just like as humans in a sense we belong together, but there's this war happening instead.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's kind of a recurring dynamic in Malick's filmography of like the love triangle. And I think it is what you just said. It's kind of like in miniature, that is the war at the heart of humanity. It's like the tension between commitment and covenant and straying, right? And wanting to go off of someone else. Like that is the nature of sin. And it's the whole Bible is basically like God's covenant with his people, but the people are constantly choosing.
The love triangle is
the love triangle, right? The people are we're constantly going after the third party in this relationship, the other woman, so to speak. And like throughout his films, there's that love triangle dynamic. Days of Heaven, it has that as the central plot point. The New Worlds, John Smith, Pocahontas, and John Rolfe. So Christian Bale and Colin Farrell are the two guys that Pocahontas is like kind of trying to decide between. And then in some of Malick's later films as well, To the Wonder especially, it's a love triangle from his own life, basically. So I just think that's interesting that Malick kind of focuses in on that classic narrative trope of the love triangle, which shows up in gazillion movies throughout film history. But he pulls from it this really theological truth of like, we are just constantly at war with our best interests is like the flourishing that comes with, you know, being in this beautiful covenant. But we're so fickle. We always want to wander away from that.
yeah.
So even though that's just a subplot in the movie, it's an important thing that Malick, you know, leaves in the film for a reason.
Brett, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I was kind of starting to explore around the cultural moment of the film and where that is in 1998 versus now, and what are some of the similarities and dissimilarities, I guess, between that moment and now, and how it speaks to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's gonna be a relevant film more so than the Saving Private Ryan type, which is more overtly patriotic and kind of rah war. As we've already talked about, The Thin Red Line is just, you know, a very different sort of war movie. It's not about yay this side, yay this side. It's certainly not about like yay war. It's the opposite, right? It's a war is hell type of film.
And like war is the antithesis of not just human flourishing, but like the flourishing of creation.
Right. The cosmos is at war. Yeah, for sure. He universalizes it as he always does in his movies, like in The Tree of Life. There's a human story and then there's the cosmos, and it's all part of the same, you know, fallen nature dynamic. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this movie today with the Ukraine-Russia war, and there's been some clips that have gone viral. You guys may have seen this, where it was like a soldier saying goodbye to his daughter, or a father saying goodbye to his daughter, and it went viral. And all of us assumed that it was a Ukrainian man saying goodbye to his daughter. But as it turned out, as these things so often do, that when the facts come out, it was a Russian guy saying goodbye to his daughter. And that just shows like these are humans on both sides of, you know, Russia and Ukraine. Like a lot of the Russians don't want to be fighting this war, just as I'm sure a lot of the Americans and Japanese in World War II weren't exactly thrilled to be, you know, risking their life in this way. But they're all humans. They all have daughters that they're tearfully saying goodbye to, and wives, you know, back home. And so, I think that aspect of the film is always going to be relevant. Like war it's unnatural. It goes against our nature. We were made for shalom. We were made for relationships of peace. And it's only because of the fall that we are killing each other all the time.
Wow. No, I think that's really
That's good.
helpful. I appreciate that, because I mean, even just today, I've read articles about this NGO in Russia getting calls from, you know, mothers looking for their kids, you know, just like, because they connect people's families to their soldiers or whatever, and there's just like so many have gone missing.
For the Russian children, they don't know, they don't have skin in the game of whatever Putin is doing. Like, for them, it's just their dad is potentially going to die fighting a meaningless war, and that's tragic.
It is tragic.
And with technology, we kind of get to, maybe a benefit is that we get to actually think about these things. Because when they're removed from us, we go, oh, like, yeah, it's easy, good guys, bad guys. And like, well, maybe in ways, but like you said, there are both innocent and good people. You don't choose what nation you get born in,
right,
and where your parents come from. And when your nation goes to war, you get signed up. Talking about how war is a disruption of nature, I think maybe the individual bit or scene that maybe hit me the most or stuck out to me the most on this view was around the Take the Hill part, where they were course correcting. They were calling in the artillery to figure out where it was. And then in between like the test and like the full effect, I think it was Jim Caviezel's character Whit was just kind of like looking up meditatively at the sky. And it's a gorgeous shot that kind of holds for a while. And then like you hear the missiles coming in, and it's
artillery rounds.
You couldn't you couldn't have a more clear war being a disruption of nature.
Right,
I was like,
right.
that's maybe a little heavy-handed, but it was a perfect moment, I thought. And
I missed it, so apparently not too heavy-handed.
Well, no, he was just sitting there like looking up, and Lubezki's one of the best in the game. Just a gorgeous shot. The clouds don't know they were at war. Like it's a beautiful cloudy day. The clouds are just kind of passing through the sky. Then all of a sudden you hear the bombs going through the air, and then the devastation is like, man, like war as a disruption of nature, like in a perfect 30-second scene right there.
Speaking of disruption of nature, I think there was a scene where a bird had gotten like injured
clipped?
by fire, and it was like nature suffering. It's like, you know, this bird is not participating in this war clearly, and so it's like nature is being disrupted by this human conflict, and like you said, Brett, which stems from ultimately that sin nature. And it's just like in a way where we could probably safely categorize that innocent baby bird as innocent. It's not doing anything. It's not trying to say, yeah, I take Japanese side or I take the American side. It's not taking sides. It's not trying to do anything else but just live. And it's been injured, not up on its own will, not up on its own action, not up on its own involvement. That brings such humanity to our impact to not only each other, but what we're doing to the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And that's important. That is not an unimportant fact.
No, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like an ecological theme throughout Malick's films. Like he makes this point about like nature is beautiful and amazing, but it suffers, you know, at the hands of humans who try to harness it for various reasons, but often end up exploiting it in damaging ways. So, but I do think there's a hopeful aspect to nature in this film, like, and it's hard to kind of articulate, but the presence of nature in the midst of this really dark, depressing, you know, story is actually quite hopeful and grounding, I think. And the character of Whit, Jim Caviezel's character, I think recognizes that. Like, he says things like, he says all things shining. And so even in this war, even when he himself, you know, spoiler alert, is, you know, killed because of this, he still can recognize that this is a glorious world, like all things shining, the light coming through the trees and the canopy, the beautiful blue waters in the ocean, that there's still life in the midst of the death of war and the destruction of humans. And the last shot of the movie is a testament to that. Like, it's a little like tree, like a tiny little palm shoot that's growing on the beach. So it's a little sign of life, right?
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah, you can even see the interest that he takes when he's like pouring water on the leaf and it's just kind of falling off, and he's taking interest in that.
Yeah.
It's just like the appreciation of like how nature is just there and thriving in a sense. It's actually pretty artistic and beautiful.
I thought one thing that was really interesting about his character too, and this is what I was saying earlier about, it turns all of the war movie tropes on its head, because he's AWOL at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
And usually the AWOL character is a layabout. He's typically the villain, like in any film, right? You can't trust him. He's going to be the guy that when you need him to go get the powder or whatever, he fails and like a bunch of people die and everybody's rooting against him, right? But Wit is not only just like full of life, but qualitatively heroic in a way. Like, he is willing, he volunteers for every other assignment after that point. Like, he gets thrown into the stretcher brigade, but then from there, it's like anytime there's any challenging assignment to go on, he goes on it, to the point on the last one, he's like, I'd want to be there if something happens. And that was something that I almost had a hard time. I mean, I'll just take almost out of it. Like, I actually had a hard time understanding where that was coming from. Was he trying to say that like that courage and that appreciation for the transcendence and the wonder around you in life and nature are somehow related? I was looking at, I posited that to you guys who probably know better.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a few things going on with his character. This is where I'd love to read the book, the source material, to know what the character is like in the book. But he's kind of like a Thoreau character, Walden Pond, like just very transcendental oriented, looking at nature through this kind of philosophical, almost escapist way. Like, that could be a criticism of his character. He almost like lives in this la la land of like,
yeah, he would probably be happy to live at that village at the beginning all of his days.
He seemed like a great philosopher and not a great soldier at the beginning, and so that's why I was really surprised.
Yeah, but I do think what you said, Trevor, about like, does his wonder at creation help him with courage at the end? And I think it does. You know, I think when you have such an openness to the grace of the world that God has given us, it does embolden us and give us courage to like face whatever there is to face, because we can rest in the peace of wild things, to quote Wendell Berry's poem. Like, there's a certain sort of confidence you get when you're just so aware of how small you are and how big and beautiful the world is that God made, that it just puts things in perspective. And I think that his character really like has that perspective.
Yeah, I would say kind of similarly to Brett, I didn't necessarily read it as maybe like brimming with what we would traditionally think of as courage, but more like a lack of fear. He doesn't love the war, but he is where he is. He does care about the people to a degree that like his brother's in arms, and he's, like you said, like he does what he needs to do as long as he's breathing. And he's not taking pleasure in it too. Like, theoretically, like, you would like to have, if there is war, you would like to have soldiers like that, versus like the Nick Nolte, like I'm using this to try to get, like, this is my chance to like build up my career and things like that. Or even Sean Penn, who's just kind of cynically going like, yeah, I'd love to believe in like something better than this, but this is the only world there is, and like we're stuck here. Like, in a way, like, he is kind of the ideal person for that situation, who can appreciate the value of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I wonder if that's really the normal perspective, because I think the pragmatism of Sean Penn's character of just, you know what, this sucks, but whatever, we're here. It's said at some point that, sure, this other guy is the actual commanding officer of the company, but he runs the place as the sergeant. So that typical like sergeant figure who like,
Yeah.
is the real soldier. And so it's just kind of interesting that Wit ends up being the hero in ways. And so just another one of the things that Malick turns on its head, and very, I don't know, just very intriguing. I came out with way more questions than answers in this film, and I think that's probably intentional from that part of the
Never
writer.
a bad thing with a movie, I think.
I can empathize with that point ultimately, because it's like, if I have to think of something greater than just what's in front of me, that requires more thought. It requires it. And so it's like, if I can get away with just saying, we're here, this is what it is, and there's no more beyond it, that's an easier, or at least a more culpable kind of existence and application of the circumstance that you're in, because it's just like, this is what we're here with, this is what we're doing, because if there's any more than this and anything more transcendent than this, then I actually have to consider that, and that's way more complicated than just saying what's in front of me is what I have.
Yeah, with that
And so I
perspective, you can
sympathize.
justify a lot of atrocities. You can justify,
Absolutely.
yeah, you can justify any actions in war with that point of view. And thankfully, the movie didn't go that far. But I mean, it really
Absolutely,
did portray like there's different ways to even wage war, which not very many war movies kind of put that in front of the viewer either.
Yeah. So I would definitely say this is a quite a layered film for sure.
Yes. The relationship between Wit and Sean Penn's character, in a way, I think maps onto the nature and grace dialectic in the Tree of Life, which is another dialectic that I think Malick explores in numerous films. But that, Sean Penn is the nature guy. Like, nature is cruel. There's nothing else. Like, this is a dog-eat-dog Darwinian world, and all we got to do is just try to survive. Like, and Wit is the like all grace character, where he's like, he sees the glory, he sees all things shining, even in the darkness of the world. And I wonder if Malick, just like in the Tree of Life, I think he's not saying these two are like all right and all wrong necessarily, as much as he's saying this is the dialectic that we exist within. Like, there is a truth to nature's cruelty. That is a real dynamic, but Absolutely. we also live in a graced world where there is more beauty than a Darwinian explanation can account for, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to like balance these together. And the two characters of Wit and Sean Penn's Sergeant Welsh, I think, hash that out in their conversations in really interesting ways.
So Brett, a couple of questions here as we're kind of winding down. Just kind of overall, I know you say you don't really consider this a war movie, and I know your love of Malick, it's probably at like near or at the top, but are there any other films that kind of explore these sorts of themes surrounding war that you might, if somebody liked this movie and the questions that it raised in particular, do you have anything that you might point our listeners to?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind first is Clint Eastwood's two films about World War II that he made as a duo, Flags of Our Fathers and then Letters from Iwo Jima. So those two movies tell the Battle of Iwo Jima from two perspectives, the American and the Japanese. And so I would recommend watching those as a pair, and because it gets at this whole idea of like war is a human experience, that it's not about the right side and the wrong side as much as like this is an existential problem that we're facing, that we keep killing each other. So that's what comes to mind as like, if you like The Thin Red Line, you probably would like those two films.
I had forgotten about those. I've watched them both once when they came out, but that was a very effective, and that's kind of interesting too, coming from Clint Eastwood, who has both starred in and made kind of very, and I like plenty of his work, but his work a lot of times does boil down to good guy shoots bad guy.
Yeah, but that kind of changed with Unforgiven. That movie, I think, started him on a path of like meta kind of questioning of his own personal like place in film history. Yeah, so it's almost like that. The Unforgiven is looked at as the movie that like introduced the deconstructed Western, and I think with his two World War II films, it's almost like the same thing with the war genre, like deconstructing the war film.
Absolutely.
I gotta see that one.
Yeah, I think you would. I think you and your dad would both like those, Trev.
They are very, very violent. So, Vince, I don't know if you should watch it because
they're much more Hollywoody violent. Yeah, for sure.
My man watches horror. Like I'm just like having a hard time understand, but I understand it's all about
war
the
is
context.
more real than like a supernatural killer than like men. Like especially what got me on because it had been several years since I've watched The Thin Red Line. All the bits with where they have the bayonets. It's like it's chaos. It's literally scared men stabbing each other in order to stay alive. It's not.
Isn't it crazy that they were still using bayonets like as recently as the 1940s? They're using bayonets.
That's crazy. Just to throw in there, I did grow up in a charismatic tradition. So demons and all of that stuff with horror films is familiar to me. But thankfully, none of the demons kill anybody. So either way, I think, and the thing is, I want to have enough integrity to say, like, I may have a particular take on a genre or film or books or movies or TV shows or whatever. But if I can find an alleviation to that genre, then I can be reintroduced to it to be able to accept it. So I accept that, and maybe I'll definitely dip my toe and start to try to see if that's a genre that I can get familiar with for sure.
I think those are often the most interesting movies, are the ones that play with genre and subvert genre expectations.
Yeah.
So even if horror isn't my favorite genre, like I love the movies that like subvert your expectations,
Yeah.
With it. And the same with war films or whatever.
Absolutely.
Now, Vince, I'll shoot you some ones there too, because like war in and of itself is not a cool thing, and almost always the most interesting war movies are either like patently like anti-war, going like this is bad, or ones that cause you to think, like the Flags of Our Fathers, Iwo Jima, like that center the humanity, and then kind of showing like war is the antagonist, not the other team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, hey, expand my list, and as long as the Lord gives me time on this earth, I can check some stuff out.
Here at The Substance, we're trying to keep it biblical, thoughtful, and human, and what's more human than needing insurance? Even though we don't know what life has in store for our homes and cars, we can still prepare. Introducing the Damage Doesn't Have to Be Too Damaging policy from American Family Insurance. Insure carefully, dream fearlessly, and listen biblical, thoughtful, and humanly.
If you're one of our listeners in the Kansas City area and you're looking to purchase a home or even to get a second opinion on the home you already have to make sure your rates are competitive, contact Chris Hotchkiss at 913-268-8200 today. American Family Mutual Insurance Company, SI, and its operation company, 6000 American Parkway, Madison, Wisconsin. So shout outs?
For sure. Let's do it.
Brett, you've been on the show before. You know the drill. We like to do some substance shout outs at the end. You can either do some kind of in the Malick war film vein. I know you mentioned the two Clint Eastwood movies, but what have you been either enjoying recently, or what do you think based on our discussion here that might be some films, books, albums, podcasts, articles? What have you been enjoying or found edifying lately?
Man, after the like end of a year where it's like watching so many movies, January and February are like slow months for me with movies. But I have been enjoying the Kanye West documentary Jeen-Yuhs on Netflix. That's really well done and really interesting. I'm only on the second episode, but if you're interested in Kanye and his story, that's a really interesting film.
All right.
I've been reading Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is sort of like what I read when I want to just relax and like just go to like a relaxing place. I often describe Wendell Berry as like the Terrence Malick of books for me, in the same way that like Malick's films are immersive and they just kind of like wash over you like a Sunday afternoon nap sometimes. Like Wendell Berry is the same way. So music, do we do like different like genres? Can I make some?
Sure, yeah, whatever you like.
Recommendations. There's a band called Color Vault that I've been really digging recently. It's like worship, but like you've never heard it before.
All right.
So check out Color Vault.
Color Vault.
It's got the singer from Young Oceans, who is a really great Christian, Brian Eno type Christian artist.
Have you seen After Yang yet?
I have not seen it. No, I am going to see it this weekend. Hopefully, it comes out here in LA Friday.
Love to get a connection. Nice. I think it was on the online festival, but I didn't get to watch any of those movies because I was all excited when I was like, oh, you can rent like individual tickets, but they were actually doing time slots. And I was like, I can't build my day around streaming a movie on my computer.
Yeah, they still haven't figured out how to do film festivals online well.
Like if it was a 24-hour window where I could pay my $12 and watch anything, but it's like, no, you have to show up at your computer at 9 p.m. And I'm like, not going to do that.
Who does that in the 21st century?
People who are paid. I mean,
I did go to a few Sundance online screenings, but it was so annoying because I had to like you said, I had to like block out a 6 a.m. screening, it's painful.
Sheesh.
Well, Brett, anything you're working on now currently, or anything you'd like to promote or send our listeners to? We'll put your personal handles in the show notes, but anything you're excited about?
You could give a shout out to my most recent book, The Wisdom Pyramid, which I'm still kind of promoting.
Did it win something recently? I feel like I've said it won something or was nominated for something recently.
The TGC awards, and Christianity Today gave it like an award of merit for their book awards. So I guess that was cool to see for sure.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm not writing any new books at the moment. I'm like getting hunkered down for like Fatherhood of 3 for the next like year. That's going to be my focus. Yeah.
That is a big project.
Fair. That is absolutely fair.
A good one.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, how long has it been? When did The Wisdom Pyramid originally drop? It's been a while, right?
A year. It came out last February.
Yeah. No, we shouted that out. I really enjoyed that. I've got your signed copy that I maybe won from another podcast, perhaps.
That's possible.
I think Crossway sent us one.
Classic Philip for anyone listening.
It is. I win a lot of things. Crossway sent us one just when it came out that I read. And then when I won the signed one by you, I gave my copy away to someone else.
Oh, there you go.
Nice. There you go.
Spreading the love.
Well, Brett, my one last question before letting you go. Do you have at this time, or should we wait later for our next assignment from you?
Oh, like Malick assignment?
Sure, Malick or whatever is your favorite.
Oh man, I mean, The New World is probably one you should see.
I would feel like The New World makes the most sense next. I'll say, I think I maybe mentioned this at Tree of Life back in 2019 when we talked on that one. I'm gonna say I didn't like it. I didn't get Badlands the first time I watched it, and I'm a big fan of that one now. I would be super interested to see Trevor and Vince's reaction to that. But I think The New World maybe makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, okay. I would be happy to come back and chat for my 5th appearance.
Wow.
And I'm excited. Okay. I think it's Mubi now. The Voyage of Time is finally up. I'm going to get my free 7-day. That's maybe a shout out. Listeners, get yourself a free 7-day trial for Mubi and check out the Voyage of Time, which I've been waiting to see for years and years.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah. Oh, some other recent movies that I would plug that I think just came on to like Amazon to rent, but Come On. Did you guys see that with Joaquin Phoenix?
It's on my list. I haven't seen it yet.
That was one of my favorite movies of the year last year. It just really captures like some interesting dynamics of parenting in today's world.
All right.
And Joaquin Phoenix is just incredible.
Yeah,
So,
that dude he's brilliant.
and then did you guys see Swan Song? Have you heard of that movie?
No.
Swan Song.
I'm racking my brain. What is that?
It's on Apple TV Plus. It's
I've
it's
seen
like a
it.
dystopian.
I haven't seen the
film
movie,
about-
but I've seen the
Oh, is that
plots for it.
Mahershala?
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
See,
I've seen trailers for it,
streaming movies come and go so fast. Like I still haven't seen One Night in Miami
Yeah.
yet, and
I
that's on
know.
the Criterion now.
Yeah. Who is it? Wow. Okay. Yeah, you should see Swan Song. I love the
I'll put that. I'll
the
bump that up on my list.
dystopian movies are a great way to think about what it means to be human, right?
Mhm.
And that film is especially interesting.
Well, I'm excited to hear that.
I'll
Like
be on that tomorrow.
I'm a fan of Mahershala, and when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, great!" And then 10 other series and 3 other movies all popped out at once.
No,
And
great,
I
great
haven't
stuff
added it
gets lost.
to my letterbox list yet, and
Yeah.
Swan Song I will bump up there.
Wow,
It's
absolutely.
the curse of the streaming era. There's like amazing stuff that just gets totally lost in the glut, right?
Yeah,
So,
Glut is a perfect word for it.
It is
man.
too
Okay,
much.
we're
Swan
saying,
Song's
like,
on the list.
It would be cool if, like, for the next, I don't know, decade, all the studios were like 1 movie a month. Nobody's releasing more than 12 movies this year.
Seriously,
That would
And
be
that'd
awesome.
That would be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, but then Hollywood would pick
movies.
12
They'd probably make better
re-releases.
ones.
They
Yeah.
would
It's easier to
they
skip.
would pick Ghostbusters 8, Ocean 4.
That's funny because it's so true.
I'm happy to skip
The
them
next
then.
Doctor Strange film, the next Star Wars
Oh,
film. And like there'd be like one artistic film.
Any update? Is Terrence Malick's Jesus film maybe coming out this year?
There's talk of that, but I highly doubt it. But I would be pleasantly surprised if it came out. I know it's finished filming. Like it's been a year since they finished.
He edits for forever too.
He edits for years, and this is his Jesus film, so I wouldn't be surprised if he took 5 years to perfect it.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Well, Brett, thanks so much again for your time and all of these. I have like so many tabs open now on my browser of all of these suggestions and everything. Like very living up to the senior editor of arts and culture title there for sure. And we just really appreciate you and your ministry.
Thanks, guys. It was fun as always.
Excellent.
All right, thanks, Brett.
Thanks,
Have a
Brett.
good night.
We'll see
See you
you.
guys.
I'm super pumped. That was such a cool conversation with Brett McCracken, and I'm just soaking it in, like all the knowledge, and I feel like I almost hate to say it because the movie's 3 hours long, but like I feel like I need to watch it again.
I was gonna say I feel like this will be one that you return to and like more upon future viewings.
Yeah.
Hey, it's another Criterion Collection disc I can get you one day.
Oh, all right. Yeah. When you finally replace it with something, and I'll get. That's perfect, man. That's how I get most of my films. Brett's got some review stuff as well that we can post in the links in the show notes.
Yeah, he's written widely about this film and Terrence Malick. I'll throw some of those in the show notes there. Thanks for joining us here for this. I always love it when we have Brett on. I love it when we talk movies, but it's always particularly enjoyable when we have Brett on talking Malick. If this is something that you like, you want to hear more of it, tell us. I mean, it sounds like we've maybe decided that The New World is the next one, but if you feel strongly about another Malick entry, let us know. And if you want to help us keep doing this, you can join us at our anchor link in the show notes. You can sign up for either $5 or $10 a month or $1 a month. There's that option too.
Ooh.
Yeah, hey, $1 a month, that adds up. If you're like, hey, I like these guys, but like I want to keep it reasonable here, $1, we'll take it. And then if you want to just hit us every now and then with like a little digital tip, if you're like, you know what, I really love this movie, I enjoyed hearing about it, I'm not quite going to join up for a monthly deal, but I'll throw you $5, $10, $20, whatever. You can do that on Cash App at $TheSubstancePod.
You already know the deal. Definitely visit thesubstancepod.com. There we will have our socials in the upper right corner of the home page. Definitely click on our episodes category. Pick your favorite episode and let us know what you thought about the episode in the comment section. Our YouTube comment section is disabled, but our substancepod.com comments section is absolutely enabled. So leave your comment. Tell us what you thought. Tell us what you enjoyed. Tell us what you thought we could cover that we didn't cover. We just want to know your thoughts. So visit us at thesubstancepod.com and follow us on The Substance Pod.
Once again, it is 2022, the year of the voicemail, and our phone lines are open. The answering machine is standing by to receive your phone call at 913-703-3883. You can call, you can leave us your testimonials, your ideas
talk to
on
us. It's
Terrence Malick. You can just talk to us. It's
nice hearing your guys' voices. It's always awesome getting DMs and tweeting at us and whatnot, but it's always cool to hear voices.
Just like your buddies.
And if it's concise, we will put you on the show.
We may put you on the show.
Like you might send an audio message to a friend of yours or something like that. I mean, just any of those things you can do, and we'll listen to it. That's what a voicemail is.
For sure.
So, well, what an email is something that you write electronically and send it to thesubstancepod@gmail.com if you want that electronic message to get into
some electronic mail.
Our electronic mailbox.
Mm-hmm.
And the people you would be talking to in that case it's just your friends who are the Substance hosts. It's me, Trevor Aiken,
and Philip,
and Vincent,
who are really excited to see you next time
on The Substance.
We gone.
If you enjoyed it and want to help join this,
that was good.
Join the Substance movement, but not to the exclusion of your local church.
That's true. That's the B-roll right there, perhaps. Join the